At this recording, with 268 new all-time highs in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, since 2013 we are in one of the longest bull markets ever. A new generation of investors and traders entered the marketplace. In the current market environment, with endless liquidity and government post-COVID spendings, everybody seems to be a great investor. It's now the right time to take a look back. In today's show, we are pleased to ask Gautam Baid, the author of the international bestseller The Joys of Compounding, 5 deep questions on the importance of studying history in investing. This will help us to understand the implications and learnings from history in the current market environment. And by the way, Gautam's book is much more than an investing book. It's an inspirational guide to long life learning and to become a better version of yourself. Now let's go to the show and have fun. Welcome to our channel. We've got today Gautam Baid, the author of the international bestseller The Joys of Compounding. Thank you for having you on our show.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here.
Your book is packed with wisdom and quotes on how to become a better investor. Currently, in this market environment, everyone seems to be a great investor. Having said that, we are focused in this interview on the importance of studying history. But first of all, Gautam, please let us know, what was your motivation to write such an extraordinary book?
Well, the primary motivation was simply to share my life's biggest learning and to help others. And one of the big learnings that I've taken over the years is that our goodwill compounds when we share with others, and we should act as a funnel of knowledge, not a sponge. As Charlie Munger so beautifully put it, the best thing a human being can do is to help another human being know more. In life, the winners also lose occasionally, but those who help others win can never lose. So always help others rise. That is how goodwill compounds over time. My life epitomizes Isaac Newton's saying, if I've been able to see further, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants. The Joys of Compounding is my heartfelt tribute to all my teachers who helped me achieve financial independence, become a better and wiser person, and embark on the path to a fulfilling and meaningful life.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom with us in this book. Let's start with history in general. The most successful long-term investors like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, or John Templeton always refer to history. Templeton once said that history, or understanding history, is a great asset for an investor. Can you please explain to our audience what that means and what is your take on that?
So let me share a story with you. Bob Rodrigues, the managing partner and CEO at First Pacific Advisors, had once met Charlie Munger at the USC Graduate School investment class. And he asked Munger, if I could do just one thing to make me a better investment professional, what would it be? And Charlie Munger replied, read history, read history, read history. Yeah. To explain why Munger said that, I'm going to illustrate with the help of 2 very important aspects. Number 1, the irrelevance of politics for long-term investing. And number 2, the incredible long-term wealth-creating track record of equities as an asset class. Let me handle the political angle first. So in 1901, we had Theodore Roosevelt, a Republican, who took charge as the President of the United States of America. Fast forward a few decades later to 1945, when we had Franklin D. Roosevelt, a Democrat in charge of the Oval Office. During this period of this 44 years, from 1901 to 1945, America experienced a variety of economic adversities, including 8 recessions, the Great Depression, the financial panic of 1907, and 2 long-drawn brutal world wars. However, despite these massive headwinds, America's GDP grew from 21 billion in 1901 to 228 billion by the end of 1945, an incredible 11-fold increase in GDP over those 44 years. America continued to march ahead, irrespective of whether it was being led by the red or by the blue. The post-World War era has seen a similar balance as the political pendulum continues to shift back and forth. From 1945 to the end of 2020, during this period of 76 years, Republicans have held office for 40 years and Democrats have held office for 36 years. And during this 76 years, America's GDP has grown from zero point 0.2 trillion to nearly $21 trillion at the end of 2020, an astonishing 105-fold increase in GDP. So America's economic progress has always been on and will continue in the future as well, whether Republicans hold power in the White House or Democrats do. Owning a piece of this great system via a collection of high-quality businesses for the long run is a winner's game. Singapore's former Prime Minister and the nation's founding father, Lee Kuan Yew, had very aptly said, if you do not know history, you think short term. But if you know history, you think medium and long term.
Yeah.
Whenever you are confronted with fear, doubt, or despair in the media about any ongoing crisis, you should only focus on the big picture, which is the one that is worth thinking about if you expect to be able to maintain a firm conviction in equities for the long run. The big picture tells us this, that for more than 2 centuries, in spite of all the major and minor calamities and all the hundreds and thousands of reasons given in the media for why the world might be coming to an end, equities have rewarded their owners with real returns of more than 6.5% per year on average, far higher than other asset classes like treasury bonds, treasury bills, gold, and the world's reserve currency, the US dollar. History clearly shows us that equities deliver the highest long-term real returns. Acting on this bit of information will be far more lucrative for investors in the long run than reacting to the opinions and suggestions of all the commentators and economists who keep predicting the coming depression. It is why Buffett always keeps saying that investors are in a game that is heavily stacked in their favor. I mean, throughout the 19th to 20th century, during this period of 100 years between 1900 and 2000, American equities delivered a total return of nearly 10%. And there was no rolling 30-year period when equities delivered a negative return. So equities is a long-term game. The longer the time you give it, the greater the chances of success. So these are the 2 big lessons from history, that over the long term, who is in power, at the center or the central government doesn't really matter. All that matters is the businesses you're investing in. You have to believe in entrepreneurship and the power of incentives in driving profit and wealth creation.
Yeah, and I guess the long-term rate of return you just mentioned for 200 years, 6.5%, that's the best argument to put your money in equities. Because in the long run, I guess there's an easy rule. If you've got 7% per year, you've got a doubling every 10 years. So that's really huge.
I'll just share some stunning numbers here. So, if you had Jeremy Siegel, who had written a very great book called Stocks for the Long Run, yeah. In his book he had shared a particular chart showing the total returns which you would have made if you had invested in equities at the beginning of 1802 and held on till the end of 2012. So, if you had invested $1 in the S&P 500 in 1802. By the end of 2012, you would have more than $704,000. In contrast, if you had invested that $1 in treasury bonds, you would have only $1,778. And if you had invested that $1 in the US dollar, the world's reserve currency, you would have just 5 pennies with you at the end of the 2012 period.
That's hard. So let's come to question number 2. The market currently trades on high valuations. Compared to history, we are in the S&P 500 index based on the Shiller-Cape ratio on the second highest level since the dot-com bubble in 2000-2001. Shiller argues that future returns will now statistically be quite low. He also suggests that in the long run, markets may reverse to the mean. With history in mind, Gautam, what is your view on the idea of the markets and stocks may reverse to the mean in the long run?
Like you rightly said, the Cape ratio is right now at the highest levels seen since the dot-com bubble of 2000. And we have an entirely new generation of investors in the stock market today who are saying that we are entering into a new technology era, and historical standards of valuation no longer matter. This time it's different. But as Sir John Templeton had very famously said, the four most dangerous words in investing are this time it's different.
Yeah.
In the short term, the market is a voting machine and is driven by herd behavior. But over the long run, the market is a weighing machine and it weighs profits and cash flows. We can learn some important lessons from the past about what the future may hold for investors who are paying exorbitant valuations for today's hot stocks. Let us go back in time to canvas one moment of investor euphoria, the era of the Nifty 50, to see what the future may hold for today's current batch of high flyers. The Nifty 50 were a group of blue chip growth stocks like IBM, Polaroid, Kodak, Coca-Cola that had become institutional favorites in the early 1970s. All those companies enjoyed large market caps and had proven track records. And at the time, investors did not find it unreasonable to pay 50, 70, 80, or even 100 times earnings for the world's fastest growing and most prominent companies. But if you had bought those very expensive stocks, suppose in the middle of 1972, and held on for the next 10 years, that particular basket of stocks would have delivered you zero or in some cases negative returns. So margin of safety matters. And that is why Warren Buffett has often said that for an investor, paying too high a purchase price of the stock of even an excellent company may undo the effects of the subsequent decade of favorable business developments. So your entry price and the entry valuation does matter. But yes, at the same time, if you had bought those particular expensive stocks and held on for 20 or 30 years or more, then you would have had positive rates of returns. But in today's era of technological disruptions, how many stocks in the world can enjoy that level of longevity over 20, 30 years? Hardly any. So to shift the odds of success on your side, you should pay some attention to entry valuations also. Very, very important.
Yeah, and I guess a fun fact of the Nifty 50 time in the 70s was that people were thinking about inflation and they tried to compensate that with growth stocks. And the fact was that the inflation 70s and not of the beginning of the 70s, and maybe it's a similar situation right now. We are all talking about inflation, but we come to this later. Question number 3. In your book, in chapter 19, Read More History and Fewer Forecasts, you are referring to forecasters and narratives. Due to the media and some statistics, we currently, as I mentioned, may live in an inflationary environment. Forecasters on CNBC give daily their prospects on what this means to an investor. On one hand, there are forecasters who are telling us inflation is good for stocks, and on the other hand, there are some who are telling us the next crash is behind the next corner. Why shouldn't we bet a dime on forecasters and narratives, Gautam?
Well, Alex, try this fun exercise. Google results for past predictions by any market experts on any macro topic over any randomly chosen period of a few years. You will never take any of them seriously again. Predictions just grab eyeballs and achieve nothing else. And one should be an ardent student of financial history. And when the interest rates go up, then market should fall, and when the interest rates go down, why the market should rise. Convenient narratives and conventional beliefs are frequently shattered by historical data and hard numbers. For example, there is a very famous saying on Wall Street: "Don't fight the Fed." That is, if the Fed is on a tightening spree, don't be long, and if the Fed is on a loosening spree, don't be short. Sounds intuitive and logical, right? Now, hear this. From January 2001 to October 2002, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates all the way down, but during that period, the S&P 500 declined 43%. From September 2007 to March 2009, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates throughout that period, but over the course of that time period, the S&P 500 fell 56%. From June 2004 to September 2007, the Federal Reserve hiked interest rates a total of 19 times. But the S&P 500 rose 33% during that period. And from December 2015 to July 2019, the Federal Reserve hiked interest rates 9 times. But the S&P 500 rose 45% during that particular time period also. So, as you can see, the narratives and the numbers didn't match here. Now, observe two commonly heard statements in the business media. The markets are turning weak because of rising interest rates. And historically, the markets have done well during periods of rising interest rates. Most of the time, you will hear the majority of the intelligent sounding people in the media focusing on the first option. When there is a sharp correction in the market, preceded by a rise in interest rates, you will often notice that until the market does not react at all or remain sideways, the rising interest rates won't make it as a screaming headline. In fact, during those times, those same people may show you charts and tables showing past bull markets during rising interest rate environments. The markets move first. The accompanying sense-making narrative follows later, always. And the hard reality is that the markets will do what they want to do when they want to do. So investors should not obsess over high-frequency macro indicators. Simply focus on individual businesses and their industry developments. That's the best one can do. Always remain humble and be intellectually honest.
Yeah, that's much easier than get deeper into the macro environment. Just from a long-term and short-term perspective, in a retro perspective, everybody can feel the joy of compounding. However, in the present, it's tough psychologically, the challenge to have the trust in your own investment decision in the long run and resist the noise of the market. What do you suggest to tackle your own financial behaviors to become a long-term investor and resist on short-term activism?
That's a good question, Alex. So investors tend to get jittery whenever they experience sudden and sharp spikes in downside volatility. But they need to understand that it is just a routine characteristic of stocks, and that the periodic downside volatility in both bull and bear markets is as predictable as day following night and night following day. In my book, I've shown a table which shows the maximum drawdown in the American equity markets under different political regimes from the late 1920s till present day. And those drawdowns have ranged from 9% to as high as 86% between 1929 and 1933. But did all that interim stock price volatility make any impact or dent on the long-term business performance of the many big wealth creators? No, because investing is all about identifying businesses with high quality earnings growth and capital allocation and firmly holding on to them as long as they exhibit those characteristics. The stock markets do not really matter in the long run when you invest in such businesses, and more importantly, stay the course. How you behave is the most important factor in investing. Since March 2009, numerous worrisome headlines have driven many investors to sell out of fear and exit the markets completely. It is why Peter Lynch very aptly said that whatever methods you may use to select stocks, your success will depend upon your ability to ignore the worries of the world long enough to allow your stocks to succeed. And no matter how intelligent you are, it is not your head, but rather it's your stomach, your gut that will determine your fate. To succeed as an investor, one needs to be hopeful, positive, and optimistic. And remember, the pessimists may sound intelligent and may be covered the most of the times in the media, but it is the optimists who make money. Commerce is the fundamental backbone of civilization. When we invest in stocks, we participate in commerce and support its constant progress. Those who focus on this big picture prosper in the long run. Others who focus and think only about crisis tend to panic at the worst possible time and lose out on promising wealth creation opportunities.
Gautam, this current market drives the investors sometimes crazy because it's going up and up and up and up. For our audience, could you please summarize the implications of our discussion in the current market environment? How can a thoughtful investor deal with this situation?
There are a couple of things which any thoughtful investor should do. Number one, always be mindful of adapting to changing realities. So, companies, industries, economies, even countries evolve over time, and we have to keep constantly learning and evolving ourselves and adapting to the changing times. At the end of 2010, the two biggest companies in the world by market cap were ExxonMobil and PetroChina, energy companies.
Yes.
And at the end of 2020, the two biggest companies in the world by market cap were Apple and Microsoft, technology companies. At the end of 2030, the top two companies in the world by market cap may well be different, and they may well come from some industries outside technology. We don't know today. But if you want to succeed over the long run as an investor, you have to be a learning machine and keep on learning. So that's the first point. The second thing which any thoughtful investor should do is avoid anchoring bias. Focus on valuation and the future growth and not the past stock price. Investing is all about the future. So, if you focus on, the 52-week low price or the all-time low price and wait for that to come, you may end up losing out on many promising wealth creation opportunities, especially at the start of a new bull market. Because at the start of a new bull market, stocks tend to rise very rapidly from their depressed bear market bottom levels. So don't focus on just the stock price, focus on long-term intrinsic value. So that is the second thing which investors should do. The third thing is understanding where we stand in the market and business cycle. Howard Marks has very famously said that you can't predict, but you can prepare. You can not forecast the future, but you can definitely get a sense of where you are in the present, right? So in the current quarter, more than 80% of S&P 500 companies have reported earnings, and the S&P 500 quarterly EPS, with 80% of the companies reporting earnings so far, has already exceeded the all-time high quarterly EPS reported in the third quarter of 2018. So that clearly tells you that we are at the mid to late stage of the business and market cycle. So right now is not the time to chase momentum and go down the quality curve. It is the time to increase the quality quotient of your portfolio. So this is how thoughtful investors should adapt themselves to changing market conditions. So these are the three things which all thoughtful investors should do.
Gordon, thank you very much for your great insights. And I'm very happy to have this book in my hands because, as you can see, it's well used. I like it really. And I recommend our audience to get a copy of this because you have to have this on your desk. Thank you very much for having you on our channel, and I wish you all the best for the future and also for your investments. Thank you very much, Gordon.
Thank you, Alex. This was fun. Thank you.